Hi, welcome to Character Animation Lecture Series. My name's Cameron Hood. This lecture is the fundamentals of animation. And basically what we'll be using is a simple bouncing ball shape and applying those basic techniques of how to move the ball around in our workspace, going over setting keys, setting in-betweens, changing our timing, changing our spacing, manipulating curves so we can add a certain amount of weight and feel to the ball, and take all those same basic principles and apply them to our no-man rig, go through the character, look for simple shapes, look for straight shapes, look for squash and stretch, any sort of feeling we can put into our rig, and hopefully all these workflow ideas will go through the whole series in character animation, and you'll be able to apply the different techniques as we go. And I ruined it at the end.
It was really good.
Until the end, right?
Until right there.
I know.
It was like everything you were saying was confident, it was good.
I know.
It was clear.
I'll just start again. Okay, so let's start our first scene here on the Fundamentals DVD. And what we're going to do is explore the environment very quickly. We have our time range and time slider here. Time slider, time range. We have our select tool. We have our move tool. We have our rotate tool. And we have our scale tool. And the hotkeys are R, E, W, and Q on the keyboard. We've just created a grid through the grid option box. I selected 55, I did apply and close, so it's a little bit bigger than normal. Now I'm going to create our character, which is a NURB sphere. There's the little guy right there. And by pressing F, I can frame the character up and get in there a lot closer. Now automatically, because I've selected this ball, you'll now see the channel box is open, and all these cubable channels for this particular character are available to us to left mouse click, set a key if we want to, right mouse click, select, or by pressing Z I can undo that. If I wanted to also move things, I can do it to the channel box, middle mouse button, left mouse click, middle mouse drag, Z, or I can just do the old classic move things on the screen. I can press space bar. I can choose different cameras, top view, front view, side view, perspective. Let's go to side view very quickly. I can now get in real close and see if I've set this character to the grid's ground plane. I'm also going to make this ball just do a bounce. So I'm going to set up the scene and how long the scene should take. It should take approximately 19 frames, just under a second. And now I'm going to press S and quickly select the key for our ball. Or I can also left mouse click, right key, select. I can do the same thing here. Key select, or press Z, press S, do the same thing. Or if I wanted to, I could go left mouse click, right mouse click, copy to shift and paste. And seeing as that we're going to try to do a cycle, we're really going to be aware of this copying and paste tool. Also, by left clicking on the time slider, time range, and right mouse click, we can see there's our play blast. There is our keys, convert to key, convert to breakdown, add in between, remove in between. We have our snap function. We have our tangency changing for in betweens. We have spline, linear, clamped, stepped, and flat. Throughout the series, we're really going to get into detail exactly what these things are and what does it all mean. We have our playback looping. We have set time range. We have our sounds. Should we be doing our lip sync series? We'll just be finding our sound through here. Play blast. We have our options. We can set our play blast options. I can go to movie player or F-check. We can set F-check to render globals or go from window or custom. And for now, we're going to go render globals. And we're going to close this up. And I'm going to find my render globals, which is in rendering editors. Select render globals. And for now, we're going to work 640 by 480 resolution. And we're going to go to production quality, close. We're going to go to our preferences. We're going to go to keys, linear and stepped, and I've set for weighted tangency. And as we carry on with today's lecture, you'll see why I've done that. I'm going to save those settings. I'm going to start my first post test. as an animator, it's very important that we start with things like a post test. Now, I could do just a bounce. I could choose something like 9, which is approximately halfway between 1 and 18, and just set a highest mark. Set auto key, make my life a little bit easier. Kind of adjust that. Set the time range to 18, so I know that 1 and 19 are the same. It will just, if I do a play last right now, it will just play back my 3 keys that I've set. Pop, pop, pop. So there's no in-betweens. It's just a pose test. But to sort of get in the long and short of it, I can now do things like set my timing. And I can go left mouse click, shift middle mouse click, go to 2 frames over to give the ball a little bit more time on the way up because of gravity and a little bit less time on the way down. I can also go to my perspective window and graph editor and start seeing certain curves, F curves, which are function curves, in the graph editor to see what's represented on screen here. And I can zoom right out and see the ball. What you can do in the graph editor, a lot like the timeline, is I can grab the key, and by pressing shift and middle mouse button, I can change my timing from side to side. That's 3 frames less time it would take, or perhaps I want to do 3 frames more, 2 frames more. And what you will notice is that the key line is hitting right on the mark in the time range here. And the reason why that's doing this is because I have my time snap on. If I was to have my time snap off, I could get into a little bit of trouble by having some sort of messy situation here where it's not quite at 12 and it's not quite at 13. It's sort of in between. Should I get into that situation, I can go left mouse click, right mouse click, snap, and there we have it, right at 13. Also remember, I can, if I don't have the graph editor open, just change things on the timeline. So you'll see in Maya, there's a couple different things we can do the same, just a couple different ways. I also have things in the graph editor, like holding shift, I can change the spacing, change the value of this. I would never want to ever have the value snap on or off. I couldn't imagine what my animation would look like. And the reason why I don't want that is because I want it to feel a little more organic. I really want to be able to feel the spacing out. And perfect spacing doesn't necessarily mean it hits on a perfect integer. So for now, I'm dealing with the Y dimension in this particular channel. I could, if I wanted to, go to Z or rotate, and you'll see there's keys on all this stuff here. Because I pressed S at the beginning, I keyed on all 9 channels. But from now on, I'm not going to key by pressing S and keying all channels, because if I don't want my ball to have a key on rotate Z or whatever, why would I want to set a key on 0 in all these other channels if I'm just working in my up and down? And for now, that's what we're going to focus on. It's just our up and down of our ball. Moving right along. So now that I've set my 2 extremes, I might start breaking down the scene. And for me, I'm probably going to put a little bit of hang time in, so I can move the ball just slightly down, check in the graph editor as to what I've exactly done. And what you can see here is, I imagine it like a staircase. This ball is not moving at all in space. It's moving over time, but it's not moving at all over space, then it clearly drops. And what we have to look at here is that this is my spacing up and down, and this is my timing from left to right. The same holds true if I was to now drop a key in here in Z and do this. Now, it's moving in Z from left to right, as you can see. It's not moving up and down. Although in the graph editor, things are presented to us up and down, left to right, it's important to remember where you are. If you're in the Z translate channel, this is just the value in space, greater or less than 0. Here's the 0 value. So if I wanted to do nothing and translate Z, I can just delete that key, and now again, just focus solely on my up and down. So again, we have our timing, and spacing. And if I really wanted to favor this By bringing this up closer in step pose test mode, you can see that the ball pops a lot closer. If I wanted to do something like a half for halfway down, I could take 14 and sort of visually have these two sort of shells be at half. Maybe it's a little bit further down. But that's sort of a redundant key. It's not really a breakdown. You never really want to key a half. It doesn't really do anything. A half doesn't support any of your extremes. What you want to do with breakdown keys is you want to support your ideas. And this particular idea is the extreme on the up position. So I'm going to favor that for hang time. Nothing. And there we have it. So it's just holding in space. You can see locked in space, nothing, 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 pop, goes right back up. This is a pose test mode. So this would be a great opportunity for us to go to our shot cam. Or first, let's make a shot cam. Sort of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Perspective 1 in the channel box, I'm going to go shot cam, underscore, cam, enter. Now I'm going to key this, key selected, move that to frame 1. I'm also going to lock selected. So this is now a camera that I have to animate to. I can't move around in it, but I can always refer back to it. I can also refer to my perspective view, be a little bit more free to move around. There's my little shot cam that I've created. If I want to get to this shot cam, I can obviously unlock it again, but I can also go to my outliner. You can see there's the shot cam, and there's our little character, NURBS Sphere. So, moving right along, let's start roughly getting this ball to start to bounce. So we want to look at basically how do we get our in-betweens to start to work. Because I've set my keys, my preferences on linear step and pose test mode, I basically want to get my ideas across to whoever, my supervising animator or a director, and just say, yeah, okay, the ball is going to go in the shot cam approximately this high, do a quick little play blast, and it's going to have this much hang time, but I haven't really done anything yet. Just with 3 little keys, you can already see there's sort of an in-between there. Your eye is sort of letting the ball move. It's sort of filling in the blanks for you, although we know there's actually no in-betweens. It's just sort of an illusion. It's just to sort of get a sense of our time in space. And the director might say, you know what, Cam, it's looking okay, but what if that ball could be just a little bit higher? Well, I could now double select in the graph editor, and I could do one of a few things. I could go to the scale tool, and from 0, just sort of, that's not 0, sort of set it 0, and sort of select and move everything up. And exponentially, everything will grow in scale. As we can see. And that is way the heck up there. So let's sort of get out of that, press Z. What I like to do is I like to press the move tool and just sort of randomly do it a little bit like that. Just sort of repositioning it in space. Move in closer. Go to my shot cam. And now address that note. So yeah, it's a little bit higher in space. The director could be like, yeah, great pose test. Now get to work. Now break down your scene, move forward, do your in-betweens, all that sort of thing. I haven't really committed to anything yet. All I've done is just given the rough idea of where the extremes are in my scene over time and space. A huge thing that most animators have to learn, I've certainly learned it, is that 50% of the 50% of the equation of being a good animator is basically doing fixes and be able to meet someone else's vision. Because you're probably going to be working on a team or in a team, unless you're working for yourself. But if you like your work the next morning, you don't have any notes, great. But what if you look at your work and say, hey, you know what? I got to fix that. Well, a big part of Maya is also not keying the crap out of your scene and not knowing where you've gone. And you really want to be on top of your work as you're working and remember what you've been keying, and you're not just pressing S like a moron, just flipping through your scenes. You're working per channel when you need to, and there's basically justification for everything you do need to do. It's just like 2D animation. You're not going to flip your paper over and start drawing in the back of your paper if you're not going to see it. And if I don't need to have a key on a certain channel, I'm not going to key it. So for now, what I am going to do is go through the different types of curves we can select for our in-betweens. You can see there's step tangency, what we have right now, flat tangency. If I select all, it'll put everything on flat. I can go linear. I can go clamped. I can go spline. I can break things up. I can make a total mess of my scene. I can do tons of different crap, obviously. Now what we want to figure out is how do we actually get this piece of information to make any sort of sense with a bouncing ball? And how do I do an educated curve? How do I make a good decision with a curve? How do I know my spacing works over my timing? How does anyone know? How does anyone look at this stuff and have any sort of sense of it? Well, this is really a big fundamental thing we're going to explore in this series, is to how do we really control our spacing so it works correctly throughout our scene and every single keyable attribute of the character. So here, I'm just scrubbing through now. You can see that I do have in-betweens happening. Here's my shot cam. If I was to go to Window, Animate, Ghost Selected, well, you can see here, I've got this kind of trippy looking ball thing happening. And basically you can see the inertia of the ball. You can see it slowing on its way up, and then catching itself, and then getting bigger spacing on the way down. So it's smaller, bigger, 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 biggest, and it hits. It doesn't even know the ground's coming, and bammo. And you can do an F-check with ghosting on. It's kind of a neat little thing. But basically, again, it helps you check your spacing. You can see any sort of mistakes. Now, watch what will happen. Again, if I'm just sort of arbitrarily going, okay, Johnny spline mode, or, you know what, I work linear, that's my way. What you'll see is you'll see some mistakes in the spacing. Well, hopefully, if you have a keen eye. You'll start seeing things like there's the extreme, and there's a perfect half in between one of my breakdowns. There's another half. So what you actually have is you don't have a true slow in and slow out. You have big spacing, even spacing, even spacing, even spacing. So it's going to hit very hard. It's going to feel a bit like a linear sort of robot type action. We don't want to have that. We want to have things sort of gather themselves. Let's even try it without the ghosting tool and sort of get a sense of what I'm trying to say here. Got to select the ball, unghost it. Again, let's just do a play blast. And what you'll see is it's not quite as smooth anymore. There'll be some sort of problems, and you can sort of just, it feels like it's like hitting a wall or something. It's not really truly gathering itself in the air and dropping correctly. So again, let's go back into the graph editor and start getting our heads around what the heck is happening here. So basically what I have is I have the ball coming off the ground over time in space. This is my extreme, and I want to have the ball slow in. In here, I might want to have the ball slow out, but I probably don't want to have the default flat curve here. I might want to break this handle and just change the value of those in-betweens. So it's still a bit of a bend to the curve and a favor to the key, and more of a favor to the key, but it's slowly coming off and pop. You can see there's sort of a spike in this key right here. What we want to do is we want to be mindful of that. So I'm going to spline through that, try to hide this key. Spline is really great for trying to hide your work, trying to hide your keys, but it's also terrible for it at the same time. That's why a lot of things that are known as spliny type animation, it doesn't ever hit its extremes. There's nothing dynamic about the animation. It's just sort of flowing through itself. It's very floaty. And what we want to have on the way down is we want to have like a more linear spacing so the ball doesn't know the ground is coming. So what I'd like to do is basically, just for argument's sake, to show you what I mean by all this, because it might look a bit strange to some people looking at curves for the first time, is I'm going to just use the drop key tool just like a marker on my screen, and I'm actually just going to drop in every second frame a key. Make sure key snap is on. I got to follow my own advice. And just on every odd number, I'm going to drop a key. And here's 11, Here comes 13. Here's 15. Here's 17. Bam, and you can see 19. Now if I blow away 14, just sticking with odd numbers, bank, you can see because I used the drop key tool and not just pressed S, I didn't have any effect happening to my curve. Now, some people do have a bad habit of setting their keys on spline, and basically at 14 they're trying to keep everything around it. And maybe they'll just go and just say, yeah, press S. And if we look closely, what's happening is you can just see ever so slightly that this curve has been slightly tweaked, slightly bent. Let's even use a more extreme example. Let's blow away some animation here at the keys. And again, let's just press S. Boink. So you can see you don't really have a beautiful curve, and around the curve there is an influence. It sort of bends itself. It's trying to hide the curve, but it's not doing a true job of hiding that key. So let's get back to where we were. Start doing any sort of bad habits. Blow this away. And let's analyze what we have here. What we have is an extreme and an extreme. You can see that 2 frames before it hits the ground, there is bigger spacing. You can see 2 frames before that, it's some closer spacing here. And closer still 2 frames before there, till it hits our extreme. Again, same sort of idea, but this is on the way up. This is a little bit closer spacing than this is to this. So it's growing a little bit, and this is sort of its maximum right here. Then it knows that it's starting to catch up because of gravity. It's slowing in to the top, and here's our extreme, and it's favoring. Now, what you can do is you can now grab the keys that you've dropped if you want to, and start bending it and blah, blah, blah. Or, again, like I was saying earlier, you can just blow this away and bend that curve down. You can see there it is, a little bit more slow. I generally would never drop in keys like this unless it's for a specific purpose of a curve that I want to keep. And you will see me do it throughout the series, but for something as simple as a bouncing ball, I would never drop in keys like this other than just to show you, the audience, what's happening to that little ball in space. How is the inertia happening? How is it spacing versus timing? Because you can see over time, it's the same. It's not growing any greater degree. Because it's every 2 frames, the timing is even. But the spacing is what sets the contrast. Something that I always tell my students is that the biggest thing I've learned as an animator, or the 3 ingredients of animation, truly are timing, spacing, and contrast. And the other things that are really important, just because we're on the subject right now, are what I truly believe to be the 5 simple shapes of animation. And by clicking on the right mouse button, I can draw on the screen. And the first shape is S shape. The other shape would be reverse S shape. Other shape would be a C shape. Sort of a terrible C, but you know, drawing with the mouse is like drawing with a deck of cards. So there's the other reverse C shape. The 5th shape is the straight line. Horizontal and vertical straight line. But as long as you get an S, reverse S, straight C, or reverse C, what you'll see in a few moments as we start getting into our first character assignment with the No Man bouncing around, we're going to explore these 5 shapes of animation. Straight line, S, reverse S, C, reverse C. Boink, boink, boink. There's our shapes coming back. As you work in F-Check, you will notice it does flash and they come up. And it's nice to sort of check things or add a little bit to your scene. And you'll see it's a technique that I use as we go along to try to make things a little bit clearer. But for now, we basically have something that we kind of like. Just the ball happily bouncing. But what we don't have is we don't have any squash or stretch. So let's get to that right now. And I'm going to blow away any useless keys I don't need. put my key back at 14 because I liked it at 14. Blow these away. And I basically select them and just use backspace on the keyboard, and I can get rid of any of these unwanted keys. Sort of clean up my animation a little bit. So, back to business here. Here is our ball. And the contact position is a very, very important position. I use a lot of different techniques when I animate. I ask myself many questions. Some of those questions are, is the silhouette clear? Is the line of action clear? Is my timing right? Is my spacing correct? Is there any contrast? What are the storytelling poses? And all these sort of techniques and tricks I'm sort of throwing out right now as we're thinking through this scene together, we'll be exploring over this series. So if we don't cover it just this moment, don't fret, we will get there. This is sort of a lot to cover. So let's just kind of move right along and start moving into squash and stretch. And by using the scale tool, obviously I have a great opportunity to use squash and stretch with this particular ball. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to press the insert tool on the keyboard. And I'm just going to move this down and insert the scale at the bottom of the ball here. Then what I can do, I'm not going to reset the tool. I'm going to display channel box. Sorry for that little glitch. Is I can start scaling this little guy any way I want. And basically what I'm doing is just sort of roughing it in. If I go to my perspective window, I can get an even clearer shot of what's happening here. But what I want to do is I want to try to keep the value of 3. I'm not really interested in having this ball not contain its proper mass. So if I do 1.25 and 1.25 and 0.5, well, now I have a ball, go to the graph editor, in the scale. You can see the scale has been changed. You can slow out of that scale. And at the top of the arc, I want to set it back to 1. And here I don't really care what it is. But at 19, I definitely want to copy. Let's get the ball in screen so you can see. See, there's 19. And when I paste it, I've now got the ball hooking up to itself. But the problem that I have here, go to shot camera. This shot cam is a little bit far away. Let's kind of move in just a little bit closer. I'm going to unlock it. Go to frame 1. And move in just a bit closer. Well, it's not quite in view, so let's... change the lens if I wanted to. 55. Set that. Press S, key the whole thing. Copy that. Blow that away. Paste that key there. So we're good. Can blow that away. So now we've got our new shot cam that isn't a terribly huge improvement over our last one. Lock selected. What we have is basically a ball that somehow knows to flatten itself before it gets to the ground. You can see as I scrub through this, you can see if we look, it's starting to really change shape. And as we work, we really want to be mindful of our contact positions to kind of work out planning our scenes. How is our scene moving forward? How is our character moving forward? Is our character walking forward? How do we plan that out? Where do we know where to put the steps in? And it's the same sort of concept with the bouncing ball. We really want to kind of hit our marks based on certain contacts. So what we have just before a contact here is a ball that's already squashed. Now what I could do is just set everything to 1. Because again, the ball doesn't know that it's hitting the ground. Let's go to the graph editor really quick. And basically we've locked in space from the extreme. This huge mass of ball is just staying at 1. You can see it's not scaling anymore. It's locked in space. There's no change in spacing as we move along here. But what might be a little bit more fun than that is what if we were to scale this ball? Just like we had scaled it for squash, why don't we try to do some stretch? Yeah, that sounds fun. Okay, let's do that, class. So basically, I can go 1.5 here, 0.75 here, 0.75 here, and basically, if my math is correct, I should have still a multiple of 3. You can see I got these kind of funky looking curves in the graph editor because there's this major pop between 18 and 19. But the good news is that it doesn't matter what the curves are doing in between because we snapped it and hit it right in time. It's hitting it right on the mark. We absolutely do not have to worry about what those curves are doing in the middle. We can screw those things up for all we care, and you will never see it. So, having said that, let's do the same thing when it takes off from the ground, because it looked kind of cool. Let's have like no recovery whatsoever. Or wait, let's actually try some recovery, but our recovery will come in the form of just perfect volume. 2 frames later, let's go 1.5, enter, 0.75, enter. And we're working rough right now. We're just sort of playing around with the idea of squash and stretch. Always reverting back to the graph editor. Now you can see there's a little bit of crap going on with these curves. It's not really a beautiful, pretty picture. What we want to do is really hide this key. You can see it's sort of clunking its way through. So quickly what I want to do, is with the move tool selected, W on the keyboard, I want to adjust that curve by holding the handle so that the key is being hidden. It's right through that curve. And although I've set 0 as a mark, it's really not a problem because I don't always have to show that it hit at 0. Now technically some people could argue, well, why'd you even bother putting in a key at 0? If you were just to blow this away, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. And it's completely true. Part of the reason why I just threw it in at 0 was A, it's kind of nice to show you guys on a DVD how to hide a key. And it's so close to 0 anyway. Or excuse me, 1. That's not that big a deal. It's kind of, boom, 2 frames. You can go right in there. So now, let's go to our shot camera. It's probably time to take a look-see at our green bouncing ball of fury here. Play blast. Boom. And there it is, boom. It's kind of an appealing little ball. Happy little guy. But if we don't like the way it's going on the up position, again, instead of rekeying the crap out of this, I can go into the graph editor. Let's get a control of my graph editor here. And I can make it take a little less time by just going linearly quick, or again, I could bow it if I wanted to. break the handle. Check everything else for any mistakes. No, everything looks pretty good. Don't want to have any overshoot there. We're going to talk a lot about keying our overshoot instead of letting the computer do it for us. So I'm a big fan of not letting a curve go past my key. When I set an extreme, I generally don't use spline once it hits the extreme. I usually hit in linearly if I want to hit hard, bang, and then flat so it doesn't see it coming, conk, and then slows. Or I will just choose to slow the whole thing, just progressively favoring that key. I generally won't choose spline because you can see it offsets where the new extreme is. And because this curve is now passing this key, it's now technically setting, if I was to drop a key in now at frame 5, a key that's slightly further down than 4. And again, I had set a key at 4, so why not commit to it? And I can still have good spacing and a fun time. I just don't want to be a sloppy animator. I really want to be in control of the computer as I'm working. Again, should there be a note coming from a director, I want to make sure I can address it. I can really get things moving along with my scenes. I can focus on acting. I can focus on footfall placement. I can make timing more snappy or make my spacing snappier. Just like adjusting this ball, I can do a ton of stuff now. Now that I have a character sort of on its way, doing what it should be doing, just kind of bouncing around in space, I can now start playing around with different channels, like these two neglected fellas here. And what I can do is, actually, I think I might tear this off. So I'm tearing off my graph editor. And I'll have this to be my side view. Or you know what? I'm going to make this my top view here. So we can sort of get a bird's eye view of what's happening in our scene. And by tearing off the graph editor, I'm allowed to have my graph editor sort of out and about and around my scene. So basically what we want to do is holding control, just selecting these two channels here, and erasing any undesirable keys. That was from earlier, pressing S to make a point that is now biting me in the butt. But, oh well. What can you do? Yeah, don't have it anywhere else. I want it in Y, so that's okay. So anyway, back to what we're going to do. I'm going to select these two channels. And basically what I can do is, by now holding Shift middle mouse button, making these linear, by the way, I can now, as you see, by dragging both keys through their channels at the same time using the move tool, I can now have it move in a perfectly straight line through the Z axes and the Z axes and the X axes. And just like everything else, I could scale it if I wanted to, but sometimes using the move tool is just as sweet. And let's say I want to have the ball bounce this far. That might be kind of way far, so obviously I should check my camera view here. See how our ball's done in space. Yeah, pretty bad because we moved it too much. So let's address that really quickly. Let's get this little guy back in camera. So what I can do is, again, pressing Control, both channels, I can now just grab this whole curve and change its overall value in space and reposition it. Some people call it repegging. Some people call it repositioning. I call it adjusting. Who cares? Anyway, point is, we've made this big adjustment. Let's go to the original point of contact, which is way even off our original grid. So let's get the graph editor back here. And let's check what's happening. Let's at least get this little guy on the floor. And I'm going to check the side view just to make sure this guy is touching the ground, because I have a feeling we forgot to do that. And lo and behold, he's not quite touching the ground. But that's okay. That was like super close-up view. you'll never know. But if you wanted to really make it touch the ground just because you're that kind of person and you're a perfectionist, well, of course, you can grab both contacting keys, 1 and 19, in the graph editor, and middle mouse click, shift, ever so slowly, nudge it down. And if you don't want to overshoot, you can really just sort of get in there, zoom in there, and just move it around. So, I'm satisfied. I think that looks good. Shot cam, we'll just do a little check. It's coming forward. What we're really going to need to do is we're going to have to lengthen this bounce. Because right now, 1 and 19, obviously 19 is back at ground zero. So what we want to do is we want to take the overall animation. Oh, I tore my graph editor off. Here it is. Ta-da-da. Let's just start this again. Can blow this away. So, I am now going to set my time range to 37 or 38. Enter. By setting that there, if we know 1 and 19 are the same with our sphere here, I'm going to select all on the timeline, left mouse click, then I'm going to right mouse click after I held shift, and I'm going to copy. I copied everything. And now I'm going to set the beginning to 19, and there's 37. Going to paste it. Boom. Because 1 and set 37. Because 1 and 19 are the same, we shall play this back at 1 to 36. And hopefully, what we will see is 2 bounces. And I love it when I do that. Sorry about that. 37. I have very nervous fingers right now. The pressure is getting to me. 1. So there's our time range. Okay, 1 to 36. We're laughing. Okay, select into the window. Going to do a play. Actually, let's select the ball. I find it easier if I select the ball for you guys. You can see it in our little camera view here. But now what we have is a ball at the corner of the grid bouncing twice. Bong, bong. So it's a perfect cycle. Now it's just doubled itself by copying and pasting it. And pasting value of 1 right on top of 19, because again, 1 and 19 are the same. We're able to not have any sort of little stutters or any sort of spacing problems. Our curves are going right into themselves. And just to prove that point, let's investigate that in our beloved graph editor. Let's just take a look at everything that we have here. What we can do to know for sure is we can go to View, Infinity, Curves, Pre-Infinity Cycle, and Post-Infinity Cycle. And now you can see what's happening. If we investigate a little bit closer, I can now see what's happening to the spacing in and out of this hit. I certainly want to make sure this matches up, which it doesn't seem to. So quickly we'll fix that. I'm not as good as I thought I was there. So anyway, now we're good. We have it basically mirroring itself as it moves along. Translate Z, doesn't make a big difference, but scale. Let's just double check that. Yes, everything looks fine. Looking good, looking good. Okay, so back to the original scale. So basically what we have this thing going on pre-infinity and post-infinity. So forever and ever, it will continue to go. So technically, if I set my time range to something crazy like 3777 or something like that, and if I press enter, well, what would technically happen is this ball will still be bouncing forever and ever and ever, amen, until obviously 3777 frames. Because we basically set everything to infinity. But just to get back to our original scene here, we can now take the first key at frame 1 and set at frame 37 our new extreme for translate Z, and I always do this because I am so smart. So I keep pressing spacebar because I'm nervous. Anyway, so here we go, little guy, there he is, graph editor, bum-ba-da. Now, Control, F. I'm gonna grab both, I'm gonna minimize this. And now where I like to have, at the end of my scene, I'd like to have this little guy be basically off screen. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to pull it over to 37. And have him just be at the end of the grid, right there. And I have linear spacing, so that's good. And that is good. I'm minimizing it. And now to do my play blast, what I should have is a ball with 2 bounces coming towards us. Now you can imagine that you'd want to do this sort of thing with maybe the main transform of the ball. Some people do that. I think it's sort of unnecessary to go that far. A lot of people try to animate that way. They sort of grab the top node of their character and they try to just do footfall underneath it. Whereas I don't feel that's appropriate. I feel like grabbing like a top node, like a hip node in the body, which you'll see me do in a minute when we start bouncing our no man, just like we bounce the ball. I basically place the character through space, multi-selecting. So I might multi-select feet and multi-select the hips or the body node, depending, and sort of move him around so I can have the footfall underneath. I'm not going to go in and with a ball like this, or let's say this is an airplane or whatever, and go, okay, NURB sphere. Actually, there's no main transform here, so it's sort of a bad point. But if there was a parent node of this, the transform, and just sort of move that around, it's really not a good way to animate. You can do it, but I really think that using main transforms and all that sort of thing is best suited for people who need to reposition their whole scene or repeg their scene. Should the director say, you know what, that car or that character could be more over there, and then you can scoot everything over. So in the intern, let's now take a look. There is a major problem with this ball. As the ball falls, let's go to a side view. We will notice that its squash and stretch arc or sort of trajectory is not really true to a ball that hits on the ground. Because what's happening here is the ball, as it's taking off in the air, if we do more of an investigation here, we'll see that when it contacts, here's the floor, bang. Well, obviously, this is not really going towards that path. So what you're going to try to do is now I'm going to rotate the ball. Rink. Something that I think looks pretty cool. And keep it here at 0. And probably keep it at 0 here because it won't make any difference whatsoever at the top. The reason why I say that is because it's at its true mass at the top. You would never know if it wasn't at 0 or not. Because even if I rotate it, except for that, but if I reset this, we basically had the rotate tool because we reinserted it. But if I had it in its true world space, more in the middle there, well then yeah, it wouldn't make so much of a difference. So, because we are so clever and we were trying to always not do as much work as always needed, I can now take that, which is at -40, and just sort of clean that up a little bit. Maybe just make it right on the money at -40. And I can, at the frame 36, make that -40. And now in my graph editor, take a look at my rotates, and I will see, because I am still set to step preferences, that this ball is having a bit of a hard time because it's popping. So what I can do here is have it just everything flat, so it's slowing out of that position. And perhaps here, if I added an extra key to kind of help along with this, maybe I'll make it positive 40, see how that looks. Doink. And I'll do the same at frame 4. Doink. Technically what I should have now, and if I blow this away, drop a key, oops, Z. Well, let's just not get ahead of ourselves for a second here. We have lost control, we have lost our shot cam. Okay, here we go. So, we've started putting that on, and it kind of drops a little bit harsh. I don't really think 40 was really the way to go. But that's okay, because we can always adjust that. We can go to our graph editor and scale the value of that rotation. I can just minimize it. It shouldn't be quite as offensive as it just was. Maybe I'll go to side view here and frame the ball. Now what we should have is a slight angle on the ball, but not quite as obnoxious as the angle it was before. It's sort of following well within its path. So rank, boom. So there's the ball, doink, going. But because I am such a lover of good spacing, or certainly attempt to be in my lifetime, I will at 20 make sure, and we're pretty good at 20. Set that back to 0. Hide this key. Oops. See, you gotta pay attention to yourself. I gotta go back, set my move tool, grab the handle, try to hide this key. We'll just spline it first, make my life a little bit easier. So I have longer handles to play with. And basically, try to smooth the action out of this. And because it's only happening one frame earlier, it never knows the difference. Technically, you might want to spike something like this, like not have it slow in to that turn. But again, because the ball is in the air here, and only one frame, boink, it's not really going to do anything other than this, boom, and just do the change. But let's clean this up even more and really get down and dirty here. Set this to 0. Back to my shot cam. Set that to 0. Set this to 0. Okay, graph editor, where are you? I think I killed you. So let's go window, animation, graph editor. There we are. Clean up these rotates a little bit. And we'll now blow that away. My contact, we're at 0. Clean this up, hide that key, mind the spacing. Because there's weight on that curve, obviously it went through there. And if it was a case where you find, just to cover it right now, because it did come up, if you find you have curves kind of getting a little bit ugly like this, well, you can do some things when you have weighted tangency. You can free weight that curve, and you can bring it down. And if you want to do both at the same time, you can just do that by selecting one, or which will automatically multi-select. Or what I want to do maybe is just break that handle and just select one side. And now, as hopefully you can see, I'm just dealing with one side of the handle, one side of the equation, and not both. And sort of fix this curve up a little bit. And if I wanted to unify them again and weight them again, not free weight them, unify, try that again. There we go. It's a useful tool to sort of fine-tune, adjust your curves and your spacing. But for me, if I just get this back to reset, it really makes no difference at all as far as freewheeling your curve, or sometimes just being smart about it and dropping in a key and sort of fiddling around for yourself. But you can do whatever you'd like. Sometimes I say to my students, it's good to sort of put it flat. You can sort of tune it like a guitar. And if you aren't getting exactly what you want, get a little deeper in there. Really kind of clean some stuff up. But regardless, you get the idea. In Maya, there's like tons of different ways to do everything. It's sort of the classic Maya insanity thing. You can just do everything you want, but you can also do it 6 different ways, which is really fantastic about this program. It's just a little bit tough when you're first learning to sort of get your head around some of these basic concepts. So anyway, set this back, hide this key again. Be very mindful of our spacing. Okay, looks pretty good. Looks like this curve's a little bit more bowed than the other one. Just gonna check that for myself. Okay, I think that looks okay. So let's just check our shot cam again one more time and see how successful we are. Boing. So there's our ball bouncing towards us. Fantastic. Doing pretty much everything it needs to do. I could probably slow down that rotate if I really wanted to, but I don't really want to milk this much longer. Animation does take required commitment and time. Sit down, figure it out, and do it. But what I wanted to introduce to you was some basic concepts here with a simple ball. Having it do what it needs to be doing, going between axes, adjusting our timing and our spacing constantly as we're working. If I wanted to show you one little trick, I could, just 'cause it's on my mind right now, and I meant to do it anyway. Basically, because we have everything at infinity, if I wanted to, I could also, let's say the director says, no, it's way too fast, that ball's crazy fast. Why don't you just slow it down from 1? Well, I can now slow it out in time from frame 1. And this will be like ball underwater, slow motion ball. And if I did a play blast, sort of this, and then reset all my timing, because we have infinity on and off. It's just not even bother though, but hold on one second here. Okie dokie. So infinity is on and off. Let's just set it back to 1 because it doesn't really make that big a difference. But basically what we've done is we've scaled the overall timing of the scene. And I can just do a quick play blast. You render it out and you'll see that this ball through the timeline is now got progressively slower as it travels along the time range slider here. So many tricks you can do. You can do the same sort of thing in the graph editor by scaling the overall scene. We're going to get into that a little bit more later. I don't want to overwhelm everyone right now. You can see here is now space ball. And that's good if you were bouncing a ball in space, basically. But the point of that was basically just to show you one of the many little tricks and tools we have in our arsenal here with Maya character animation. So we can essentially do our best work, keep moving forward, and talk on the same page. So now let's move on to the No Man and get rolling with doing our first bouncing character, using the same basic concepts of the bouncing ball, getting a little more in depth with the different parts of the body and the overall feel of the character, how to test the rig. And I give you, here is our character, the No Man. Fantastic. This is what we'll be doing a lot of the series with. He's a beauty. So let's get started and moving right along. Okay, so here we are. We have our character, No Man. I'm going to set up some layouts to kind of get working here. I'm going to do 2 panes stacked. Here I have my graph editor, should I want it. Some people do layouts 3 planes split top. Then you can probably put something like perspective view here, which is very, very useful. You can just click in between, hit spacebar, go back in between. Here, just select our character. Well, let's turn geometry off quickly. Select him up close. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show none, NURB surfaces, sub D surfaces, and curves. So we don't have any bones or any of that sort of thing happening. And what I'm basically going to be doing is testing out a rig. Going through all the controls, like sort of the mother of all controls. Set that to 0. And put him up here. Just going to sort of get him standing where his feet are right on the ground, starting from a 0 position. That way I know the feet are on the ground. Sort of a straight leg. Save a key. Okay, so a lot of animators, a big part of the job is getting a rig from a TD and going through it and making sure we have things working, things where we need them to be. Obviously, this is like based on the proportions of a regular human being. So we're going to look, the main control on this character is the main transform control. What we've also put is the transform offset. So if we wanted to move our character a different spot in the scene, well, we could just set a key here and keep him sort of in the center world. I can move him around, set a key there. Now, on top of that is the main transform. So just in case the director does not like that, I could also move it again if there's any mistakes. But generally, we're going to work from the transform offset should we ever need to repeg the scene or reposition it. Other than that, we're just going to use the basic controls on the character. Going from the hips, to the legs, to the arms, all that sort of thing. And make sure everything's set up essentially in the right position for us, 'cause it's very important. Now, we have IK set on the legs. And we have a lot of interesting things with these particular legs on this character. Moving the foot up and down. There's no rotation going to happen on the foot. We can just select the toe pivot. Can rotate, stuff like this. On the foot control, we have ball roll, like that. Toe bend. There you go for some overlap. Twist for the knee. And we want to be mindful about some things like penetration. And I happen to be the one guilty of designing this character, so there are certain limitations based on its art direction. So we got to be careful as how much we do put in for twists and things like that. The modeler's done a great job of following my drawings, but now seeing it in 3D, I can see there certainly are some limitations based on the actual art direction. But no big deal. No matter what it is, we can still figure it out. So moving right along, we have pelvis. Can rotate forward and back. Lumbar 1. Keeping everything sort of pivoting off the abs. Again, you want to be mindful of things like penetration here. So you could get certain shapes by just moving thorax, lumbar 2, and lumbar 1. You can see by multi-selecting things, you can get shapes to move forward. Now what I just did there was individually select them, but what you'll see is if you hold shift, I'm going to just grab the select node here. And based on the order you select them, everything here will now center off the top, so we just have a little bit of movement, but greater movement here if the character was to move back, if we were really going to push our animation. Now obviously if we did that all throughout our scene, it would look like the character has a broken spine, so we don't really want to go that far, but just showing you what the limitations are in this rig. Certain areas you have to be mindful of how you select your controls. So again, multi-select, last position that you do select is going to be your point of origin of pivoting, and there at the bottom you can see we get some nice shapes moving side to side, and everything sort of moving. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to emulate the timing of this ball that I've created. And just to show you here, the ball goes up. Let's get it in view here. And drops by frame 19. And we basically have a 19 frame cycle. Boom. So let's do a quick play blast to see where we're going. And what we want to try to show by testing this rig and getting to know the Maya interface is how do we take a ball that sort of weighs, it's hard to really tell how much this ball weighs. Let's just say it's like a, I don't know, 6-pound rubber ball. It's a big rubber ball. Maybe it wouldn't even weigh 6 pounds. Maybe it weighed like 3-4 pounds. Anyway, the point being is we have this timing. 18 frames to fit completion. On the 19th frame, being 1, it hits its cycle. So it's bouncing up and down. Now how do we take a character like a Nomad, using our imagination of how much we think it should weigh, or this guy should weigh? If he's made out of iron or steel, he's going to weigh like a ton. Like 1,000 pounds or something like that. But what we're going to try to pretend is that this robot, or Nomad, weighs approximately 200 pounds. He's about a 6'1" man, weighing about 200 pounds. And we're going to start going through the controls, testing the rig, making sure everything is where we want it to be, how we want it to be, and where it should be. And we're basically going to start bouncing this character around. Going up and down. You can see the feet drag because of the inverse kinematics. Just reset everything here. I'm going to multi-select here, grab the feet as well. Just bring our guy down to 0. I can go to side view. Make sure I'm lining up the feet with the ground plane here. And we're looking pretty good. So, I'm going to set my preferences. And I'm going to work linear with weighted tangency and really show the power of Maya and what it can do. Now that we've sort of gone through a lot of the controls on the bouncing ball, how do we directly apply that to a character? And how do we give some texture to our animation? How do we make things have different weight? What controls do we use? In what order do we use those controls? And why is it so important to have a workflow and an approach to your animation? If you sort of arbitrarily just start selecting stuff using auto key, you can just have a mess before you know it. You're sort of all over the place. People like to key the crap out of their animation. It's never really a good idea. Just like a guy just doing nothing. So we're really going to be mindful about how do we approach this piece of animation and why are we approaching it the way we're approaching it. Approach is something that we're going to be going through this whole series, talking about why are certain things smart to do and why certain things aren't so smart to do, or what are some of the bad habits I certainly picked up when I first started learning to be a computer animator, and some of the good habits I think I've sort of narrowed myself down to. So, having said that, we're going to set the time range to 19 frames, and I am going to turn off in the layers file here all the controls. And basically, I'm going to set a key on everything on frame 1. Because I do work auto key, it's going to now sort of have everything up for grabs. But I also be mindful, I'm going to have to blow away that 0 that I've just set on everything all throughout this cycle. But that's okay. It's just a workflow I'm choosing to go for right now. We're going to try to hide keys, move things forward, rotate things back, all that sort of stuff, and we're going to have to eventually understand that that 0 point that we put in some cases on the contact, it's fantastic. In other cases, something might be moving through its motion to have a smooth curve in the graph editor, we're not going to want to have a value of 0. So we're going to explore all those things. Okay, so at frame 1, I'm going to select, we're going to start doing our jump here. And I'm going to select each foot box and the hips. I have a key set there. I'm going to copy it and paste that, holding shift, left mouse click, now right mouse button, paste. I'm going to do the same thing at 11 as far as putting a key on those 3 nodes, but I'm going to move the character up, setting in extreme for the jump. And because I have auto key on, it's now selecting it in Y translation. By not pressing S, I'm able to now really afford myself a lot of luxuries. Because I know I'm going to be layering this scene, this is all about overlap, breaking of joints, getting things to follow through with themselves, straight positions versus curved positions versus reverse S shapes, reverse C shapes, so on and so forth. By using auto key, I'm able to just work in these channels. If I was just to press S, I'd get keys on everything. Scale, rotate, translates, blah, blah, blah. It would just be a big mess, and I'd be cleaning up forever in the graph editor. So for now, what I want to do is just really quickly revert back to my shot cam, turn on, maybe I won't turn on the arms here, put on the legs, body, and just sort of start getting a feel for how I'm doing. Go my render globals to make sure everything's set up properly for my scene. 6x480 is great. Production quality, perfect. Gonna go to my play blast options. Work in F-check, no problem. And what I want to do is just get a sense for my shot cam as to how high up and down he is. What you'll notice already is obviously there's 100% no weight to this character, but he is in the shot view, so the composition's okay so far. Not particularly interesting, but work with me here. And we have the ball hitting at the exact same time as our character. Now, through the layering process and learning about spacing and the curves and breaking tangencies and handles and all that sort of stuff, what we're basically going to do is start really giving the illusion this character weighs approximately 200 pounds. And we're doing it by selecting just what leads what. And that would be the body leading the legs up and then the legs leading the body down. And we're just going to work with these 3 elements, the legs and the hip node on this particular character. Now, to put some hang time in here, we can now go to the graph editor and start taking a look at what we have. And by pressing Control, I can just select the translate Ys that I have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten the top. I'm going to slow into the top of the spacing on this character. If I was to do something like slow on the way down, it would really be weightless. It's like the character knows that the body is hitting the ground. Bending the curves like this is not a good idea because it kind of gives a floaty illusion. What we're really looking for here is that the character doesn't, the body is just falling and the ground is what stops it. It doesn't see it coming, it doesn't know it's coming. And I can do things like bow the curves here by breaking the handles and just slightly bow them up. There will be progressive spacing as it falls. So as it's slowing from the top of the arc, bam, it's going to hit down. Now, maybe we're interested in putting a slight touch of flatness on the way up. If we were to do something like this, it's a bit more extreme. But seeing as that this character weighs a ton, well, actually 200 pounds, what I'm looking to do in the hips is probably copy this key and paste them here. Same with the legs. And so for 2 frames, I've really got the character on the ground. So it allows me to do some squash and some overlap. Now what I can try again is to flatten it and see what happens. But I suspect that I'm going to probably have to have a bit more of a pop with the character coming off. So I'm going to break that handle and just slightly raise everything up. So our guy's kind of moving up in the air. And again, he doesn't see himself coming down. So we should always, let's revert back to shot cam. So now we're in our shot cam. We're going to check basically where we're going as far as this little character bouncing around is concerned. I'm going to do another quick play blast. And I can see when I'm play blasting, which is kind of nice, I can sort of see my spacing. I can sort of get a feel for how the spacing's going. The character's sort of slowing on its way up. So there's nothing really interesting happening right now. The character sort of still weighs about the same as the ball. He's just not going quite as high. So that's the only other indication that he weighs a little bit more than the ball. But pretty much right now, because we haven't done anything really juicy with the scene yet, you don't really get a feeling that he weighs that much more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ghost this character right now. I'm going to select all of him. And what I'm going to do is you can see with the controls around it. By using these as markers, we can sort of see what our spacing looks like. We can see that it's slowing in, slowing out, getting bigger spacing on the way down, which is nice. You can check it here, like this. It's not playing it real time, but it's nice for us to be able to see exactly what's happening here. So, make sure we actually play back at frame 18 so we don't hold for 3 frames on the way down. But you get the idea. It's a really nice way for us to check what's happening, sort of make sure we're on the up and up. So, let's unghost the selected. Oops. Select everything. Going to unghost. So we're good. So let's start putting in the legs on this character, overlapping them slightly. So I'm going to choose right now, I'm going to have the left leg go up a little bit later than the right leg. The right leg basically is up on frame 11, so it's no problem. But let's make the left leg delay slightly. So what I'll do is I'll choose the left leg and have that one be up at 13. And by working this curve, I can adjust the spacing on the way up so that the little box is sort of working with the leg and there's not so much drag. It doesn't matter at the beginning of the scene if there is some sort of drag on that foot, because again, it's coming off the ground. You can see by offsetting the timing, we can now get a little bit of texture into our scene by bending the leg a little bit. Also, what I might want to try is pushing it even past the point that I originally keyed it. And just up ever so slightly. I'll flatten that curve there. And grabbing this one. Maybe I'll move this one up, change the timing at frame 11. Maybe I'll flatten this curve. Now what I have is a little bit of offset in the legs. Starting to put some real texture into my animation. Thinking about what leads what. I know the body's sort of the main control here in this character on this way up. So I'm not really going to play around with that too much. I'm pretty satisfied with what I have so far. It takes about 2 frames longer to get up than it does for the character to get down, so that's fine right now. Thinking of gravity. But I want to start worrying about certain things like maybe what's happening with the twist on the leg. Maybe when the character's up in the air, maybe I want to have a slight degree of twist. Maybe I'll flatten that out. Maybe also I like to have with the foot, as I don't want the foot to be perfectly, let's go to a front view. I don't necessarily want the foot to be perfectly in line with our character. Maybe I'll put a little more casual positioning in. And sort of rotate this sucker for grabbing the whole curve. And now basically what I've done for the whole scene is I've positioned that foot out of there. Now I'm going to do the same thing, just eyeball it with the other foot. I'll go to perspective view so I can grab that really quickly. And by setting the Y rotation of that foot as well, It allows it to feel a little bit more natural. Not quite as much as the first leg here, the right one, but just enough so it feels like he's comfortable. It's kind of moving right along. And this is a great example for us to really show you the controls and just how easy it is to move things in space and rekey things and repositioning things without throwing keys in all the time or pressing S or any of these horrible habits. Now, what I can also do is really revert back to the most key position here, which is the contact position. And I can do something a little bit goofy, like grabbing both of the feet. And by going left mouse click here in the channel box and middle mouse click, I can double twist, do any sort of adjustments at the same time. Also with maybe a toe bend, I can just have the feet ever so slightly dragging and then hitting the ground. But being mindful that anything that I do at frame 1, I'm copying it and I'll be pasting it frame 19. Why did that move over? Let's get this sucker back there where we're supposed to be. Let's go here. Retime that. So, by putting some bit of layering in here, I'm able to give a little bit more texture to the feeling of this particular scene and our little man jumping. And really break down the scene to really get these legs to feel like they're not really popping or any of that sort of thing. And that might come from putting in some breakdowns on the leg here. Maybe I'm going to drop a key in, let's say around frame 6. And use the move tool here and just move that foot box up a little bit. So I have some degree of drag. But the foot starts to lead the action. Maybe I want to have it catch up even more. So he's really bending that leg. Also, what I'd probably like to do is drop a key in the same frame, frame 6. And grab that key. And utilize the rotation in the foot to help with some of the drag. And I'll probably have it start to come down here because we're getting some penetration. Frame 13. Really check my spacing as I go. And sort of have that foot lead the action. Now, when we start doing things like bipedal walk cycles, what we're really going to concentrate on is copying and pasting things like the legs and using some stuff for free. But because I'm trying to break this up, and it's not truly a cycle where both feet are doing identically the same thing, I'm not going to bother copying and pasting the legs right now. I will do that when it comes to the arms, most likely. But what we'll cover in other bipedal animations, especially things like cycles, is the benefits of taking a leg like this, copying it, and pasting it to the other. But for now, because this is the fundamentals, we really just want to sort of concentrate more on the controls. How do things work in Maya? Why do they work the way they work? And how does it all relate to me as an animator? How do I basically do as good a job as possible with what I've been given as far as the controls are concerned? Maybe too, what I'll do is I'll dip the leg down. Or maybe I'll even decide to hold this a little longer so there's a bit more drag. By changing the timing, keeping my spacing, I'm able to get that arc that I want, or that rotational arc on that foot. And in the graph editor, you can see the spacing is okay, although it's very heavily favored at the top here. And if I break this handle here, foot doesn't know that the ground is coming. It's sort of going about its business. And then whammo, it's going to hit that ground. And I'm dragging the toe. Well, let's take a look at that toe bend that I put in and make sure we have a clean curve here, which we do not. And on the way there and on the way there, I will probably slow it. Maybe I'll snap it a bit more, break this handle. And check what's happening here at the top of our arc. Looks okay. You know, maybe even I'll decide to drag it a little bit more. So sort of a reverse action. There it is on the ground. Very good, coming off the ground. Now I have it dragging there, but let's try to push that even more. And you can see I wasn't super mindful there about my timing. So I'm going to show you something you can do in the graph editor. Now I know, why the heck did I put the most major action as far as the drag is concerned, the foot, and I didn't put the top of the arc on the foot? Well, very quickly in the graph editor, just to show you how you can change your timing, is I can now just grab that key, holding shift, middle mouse button, bam, there it is. Fix my spacing here. Now you'll notice there's a curve in between these two frames, 1 and 2, for this foot. Well, it really doesn't matter what the heck this curve is. This is the nice thing to know about Maya. If you have keys right beside each other, assuming that you're hitting them right on the time slider, which is what I always do, I hit them right on the mark, I can have anything I want. I can have the ugliest curve in the world in between. It will make no difference whatsoever. So let's slow out of this position, coming up, sort of slowing in, and then we're going to hit hard on this sort of snap here. So it won't feel like Mr. Super Floppy Feet. And if it does feel like Mr. Super Floppy Feet, we can take all these values here, certainly this one, and sort of tone them down a little bit. Moving the move tool. We can also do scale, but we're going to do that a little bit later. But for now, I usually use just the move tool to kind of change the value. What you can see is that the toe doesn't really bend right until just the last second when it's going to hit the ground. There. So it won't feel like super floppy feet. But it might be nice to have it really favor that. So the bend comes because the air, everything's happening behind it. And I can also free weight this tangency if I wanted to. And really move it out here so it really truly is favoring. So you can see more of a bend. Let's push it a little bit more. You can see here we've got sort of a nice overlap thing happening. And keep working on these legs until we feel relatively satisfied that there's no strange spacing or popping, and we still have that beautiful straight position that we want on the contact. So when the leg does hit here, using the hip node, bam, just squash that sucker down. We get this sort of nice break in the legs. You can adjust the hip coming on the way down here. Let's delay this leg even more. Notice I'm constantly feeling it out. I'm working rough. I'm not really super worried about anything. So at this point, it's not a big deal. Anything that I do, I haven't 100% committed to it yet. I'm just trying to get a feel for how this scene could work. Now, I think I basically would like to delay these legs even more. Have them be even more straight when the character's coming off the ground. So you really sort of get that sense that the character's trying to push himself off the ground. So I'm going to select this as well. And what you're noticing now is I'm obviously adding some keys, which is going to affect the curve on the inside. But it's not a problem because we're really interested in knowing how to hide our keys. So this is a great example, again, for us to go in and start cleaning up these extra keys that we're putting in, so to speak. Allowing us to have spacing that still works. So let's go to the leg here. I'm going to raise it slightly. I'm going to press spline. Spline seems to be quite a good call here. Same sort of thing through here. Make sure this guy is flat. Now what I'm going to make sure I do for sure is I'm going to copy and paste the foot while it's on the ground so that there's no penetration or anything. Copy and paste this. And the only thing I'm going to put one more breakdown on is the hips, to really sort of get the feeling that our no man is pushing off. And maybe what I'll do, just to kind of keep it dynamic, is I'll keep the spacing that I have here on translate Y, this sort of extra key, maybe bow it even more. What I'll do is I'll put another key, or even take my existing key that I have here, and move it down even more. And again, you can see there's some sloppy looking spacing here on the curves. But because it is 1, 2, 3, these things can be stepped. It wouldn't make any difference. It's just because we're hitting right on the mark. What does make a difference, obviously, you can do anything you want. Make that clamped, anything. Is that anything between the marks, the curve has to be correct. So, do our little quick scrub. And basically what I'm going to do is fast forward a little bit, and I am going to now remedy this leg and fix it, do the same thing to get it working as well as the other one. And then we're going to move on to the next part of the lecture. But for those of you who are going to try this, just try basically breaking down one of the legs and use it sort of as a guide. Now if you'd like to copy and paste it, you can do that. Just be mindful that if you do copy and paste it, you're going to have to reset your Y rotation, or at least put that to a negative number, because then you'll both have them slanting the same way if you do a direct copy and paste. So what I would recommend, just because you're first learning, this is the fundamentals, is individually break down each leg. So here we are, basically just done an F check for all you guys. We're just sort of seeing where we're at. I've kind of stripped out the toes because I'm not really convinced it was such a great idea. And if I decide later on to put them in, I might put them back in. But regardless, now that I've sort of broken down the body and the feet, I'm pretty happy with actually how heavy our character's starting to feel. But we have to talk about a couple things really quickly as to what we're missing. But what we actually have that is working. Some things about this are allowing us to get the feeling of weight. That would obviously be our low position and how we hit our low position. And the most important position, well, I certainly consider it to be the most important position, which happens to be our true contact position. As you can see here, the toes have just hit the ground. And that's where we get our straight position we always talk about. This is very, very important, the fundamentals of character animation, animation in general. It's a sort of how do you show weight and why is it important to show change? And what we do have is we have something that's hitting its extreme and starting to come out of it. Now, when I first started roughing it in, you'll notice that I put the other low extreme on frame 3. But I decided to rechange the timing a little bit and it had more of an impact by hitting it on frame 2. What you can see now is you can see a compression through the legs that you cannot obviously see through the body because we haven't gotten there yet. It's on our to-do list. We're going to do that just next. We're going to offset some things, parts of the body, really show that snap and the overlap. But already we're seeing, here's the straight line. Here's the indication of a C shape. Now the next frame is we're coming out of it. Still straight, little less of a C shape, but a C shape nonetheless. Then we go right back into a straight. Top of the action here, straight, starting to recoil into that C shape, the legs, and there's a straight. So if we were to draw the same position right beside the piece of animation, you can sort of get an idea of what the simple line of action is doing on our character here. Here's almost a little bit of an S shape. Just draw that there. It's not quite as strong as a C shape. And there's the illusion of a little bit of a lean right there. Coming back down to, again, our straight shape. Straight shape. And it's important as animators to really start to see this sort of line of action, this sort of compression in shapes, and thinking about simple shapes, and understanding why these simple shapes really allow our eye to see clean, graphic, dynamic movement. Because that is the key. If you have things kind of moving all over the place and compositionally they aren't really working, you're never really going to get the feeling that you're looking for, because your eye's going to have something all over the place. You can see here, because I've drawn on the F-check, you sort of get an idea of what's happening. Very, very simple shape. Almost like a noodle, or, I don't know, hot tamale bean or something. Something just kind of jumping in its spot. And F-check's nice for that. You can sort of just draw on the screen and sort of take a look at the plumb line, the shapes that you're looking for. Or check if they're not there, and if they're not there, just draw them beside them and try to repose it. So, moving right along, I'm going to put the controls on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the head, and I might even turn off the legs. But by keeping the curves on, I can still get a feeling of the jump. But now I can start to ask the question of what leads what, and really start playing around with snapping of the upper body, different sort of things. Layering the animation, making it feel dynamic. And what I've got here is I've got a few keys in the lumbar, thorax, lumbar 2, lumbar 1, and thorax. Just said that. Yay. Anyway, so I'm going to copy and paste all these 0 keys. And the reason why I'm going to do that, you see all rotations are at 0, is because this is the point of contact right now. And I want to use that as a guide. And these could be keys that, yes, I eventually blow away, all that sort of thing. But for now, I'm just going to have them as a 0 guide, because I really want to try to get that straight. And if it means I have to put a curve through that 0 position, then I'll do it. Maybe if I blow away the 0 position key and the curve might represent something closer to 0, fine, as long as I sort of get that straight position that I was looking for through the spine on the contact position. So, because this is our down position, I'm going to show you a little trick here. I'm going to go to perspective mode just to make sure we 100% get it on the money. Because I have multi-selected here, I can set this character and rotate him forward. Always being mindful of things like penetration. So multi-select was great, but also I'm going to check, go in there and see if I can sort of just set that so it's not quite hitting itself. I'm going to flatten my tangency as I'm working. Bend this in even more to really sort of show that compression. This big sort of chest cavity you have in this character, which I kind of think is one of the coolest elements of it. I'm going to set a key there. Make sure I set a key here at 0, which I thought I already did, but hey, what are you going to do? Copy, paste. So basically we've got this compression. In here I have straight. Going to flatten everything in here. And I'm just roughing my ideas from what I think is going to slow in and slow out. Obviously, I'm eventually going to open the graph editor. But right now, by going left click on the key and right mouse click, I can just sort of choose a rough tangency that I want. Now, what's also in very important position is the top of the arc, or the top of the jump, so to speak. And what I'll do here is I'm going to multi-select again. And the technique that I'm showing you right now, you can use for things like arms and legs. Multi-selecting is really, really important to get your basic shapes. And then again, ask the question of what leads what. And I'm about to show you that by offsetting the curves in time, And offsetting the keys, you can sort of get more of a wave action. It's really, really nice little trick. So for now, I'm going to go top of the arc, which is 11. And again, I've multi-selected. Maybe I'll move him back slightly. I'm just going to key right now and rotate X, because he's not only moving from side to side, because he's just jumping up and down, there's really no point in doing any sort of weird like side to side or blah blah blah. So we don't want to do that. We just want to be mindful of what leads what and how he's jumping and what would really truly happen to the body. So that's flat. So let's go look quickly at the curves in the computer. Everything seems to have a key here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it here. Great, so now we all have some sort of curve. And what I want to do is, because in the landing I want to hit hard, I'm going to go View, Infinity, Curves. Oh, well, it's already going there. No worries. And I'm going to have it softer, hit softer on the jump at the top of the arc. So through here you can see my spacing is just relatively soft. But here, I'm going to break the handle. Just take a look what's happening with this curve here. We'll go linear spacing here. You can see there's almost a case of that shark finning I was talking about earlier in the squash and stretch. And basically what I'm trying to do, as I mentioned before I was going to try to do, was I want to hide the spacing of this 0. But if I can't completely hide it, it's not a huge problem per se, because I'm going to show you a trick when I offset things as to how you can still adjust your spacing and drop in a key and pretty much always have something work for you. And it might be interesting too to play with the idea that maybe the lumbars are more like magnets on this character, sort of, because there's no, in the actual character design, there's nothing really connecting it. Maybe it might be interesting to kind of make them more like magnets. So why don't we try to texture this a little bit and actually just flatten this, make it very, very simple. And it doesn't hit as hard on the extreme as what we have, say, on the thorax, which is, yes, hitting quite hard. That sort of huge, big, heavy chest cavity. And let's see how we're doing here at hiding this key. And that looks pretty good. I have a clear indication that that spacing is quite good now, although that's a 0 key breakdown, so I can still get that for free, that sort of straight shape that I'm looking for. Technically, I've still got some spacing that works. And yeah, it's going to happen late right now. We haven't offset anything. But this is a good time to maybe do a quick play blast. You can sort of see where your ideas are going and where your extremes are. You sort of get an idea, okay, there's a guy, boom, boom. What I did make a mistake there was, sloppy me, and what you should really try to have a habit of is always double check your time range. Because what happened there was I F-checked frame 1 and frame 19. We don't want to have that. 1 and 19 are the same, so now you can see it's a lot smoother. And the interesting thing is that you can sort of feel like it's a bit like a spring. Although we've turned off the visibility of the legs, because we have the luxury of having the boxes, we can still sort of get that feeling of contact. And this sort of bizarre feeling that there's like a torso bouncing in the air beside a ball. But it's okay, it's fundamentals. This is not going to go in your demo reel. This is to get your head around the language we're going to speak in this DVD series. So now let's quickly offset our ideas. And again, we're going to think of what leads what. So I'm going to start with lumbar 1. Oh, lumbar 2. Here's lumbar 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have lumbar 1, all of it. Maybe I'll keep lumbar 1 actually on 0. You know what? I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to go lumbar 2. And I'm going to keep lumbar 1 actually hitting its lowest part right on the point of contact. I'm going to keep it 0 and have 2 frames later, bang, it does its crunch. And I'm going to grab lumbar 2 now, and I'm going to retime my lumbar 2. I'm going to show you quickly how I do this. And I can just offset it by 1 frame here on the timeline. And very quickly, by checking this, although I have now keys spilling over and not even starting at frame 1, if you watch really quickly, and this is a very useful trick, well certainly I've found it useful over a little while, is that although my extreme now is at 20, or not my extreme, my breakdown at 0, my extreme is here at number 4, and I have nothing at 1, if I just very simply go to drop a key, and drop a key right there on the curve, I can now copy that, paste that at frame 1, and now blow this key away. I can blow this breakdown away if I want to, or see, blowing it away does no harm. But what we're getting now is some spacing that still allows for us to have that straight position here, but it's just been offset by 1 frame, which actually helps counter-animate the top thorax, which we haven't even touched yet. But now if we do grab the big thorax, this big heavy metal plate of a chest of our character, and we do the same thing, this time I'm going to move everything over 2 frames to have more of a delay. I'll simply do the same thing in the graph editor, because I'm going to see what's going on at frame 19. Drop a key there, copy it, and paste that there, and by blowing this one away, blowing away 21, you can see I've still got that perfect spacing that I was looking for. And those curves kind of get a little bit screwed up because I've set everything to weighted tangency. But there's a reason why I've done that. So later on, I do have the option to subtly adjust things and freeweight the tangency like we tried earlier. So it doesn't really stress me out too much if the curves kind of pop around like that. It's sort of just part of the deal. But I'm always reverting back to the appropriate spacing. So now we've sort of got this wave offset, allowing us to hopefully have more of the simple shapes we're looking for, even now introducing perhaps some S-curves. And if we don't totally have an S-curve, it's not a big deal, because we do still have the arms to deal with. We have to finish off the head, so we're probably going to find ourselves with some more shapes. Right now specifically, we're still sort of leaning on the old C shape to straight. But there you can sort of see there's a wave coming through the body. And let's go even closer and take a look here in perspective view. Once we have that contact, you can sort of scrub through this and see relatively straight. The impact of the jump is now, boom, springing through the body here. So we're getting that sort of overlap. And the body's catching up, the top of the arc, still going over, right past frame 11. We still have the thing going backwards. You can see it's still adjusting itself. And that, my friends, is how you can overlap your extremes and offset your timing and keep your spacing. And that allows for nice layering to your animation. And you're also getting some pretty beautiful poses. So let's quickly turn on the legs. and sort of see where we're at here. For again, checking those simple shapes. Boom, boom. So he's coming along quite peachy, actually. Everything's looking great. So let's quickly move on to the arms and offset those and do the head. So now we're going to deal with Buddy's arms here. And there's two major positions we want to think about. Obviously, with something like the clavicle, we're going to have a little bit of up and down. But it's moreover, it's going to be more forward and back. And I think that what will work well for us is that on the contact position, it's sort of going to hit hard because the body is just starting to go through a bit of a jolt. You have the clavicles rotating backwards. Set a key there. And I'll just eyeball the same thing on the other side. Break it up slightly so it's not exactly the same. Set a key there. And I'll quickly flatten those tangencies on the clavicle. And what I'm going to do, obviously first, is copy and paste everything that I do. Paste. I'm going to multi-select, just like we did with the body, same thing on the arm. And we're going to ask the question, what leads what? What is the best thing to position to have? What's the best sort of overlap to have? And if I break up some of the curves, as long as I'm dealing with what's happening in between the extremes and hitting at the right moment, I can really get some nice texture in my animation. So by selecting the shoulder, elbow, and hand, I can now, at the back position, sort of set a key if I want. There. Set a key, copy. Paste, have everything back. And now I'm going to grab and set a key at the clavicle at the front, at the top. Maybe I'll do this at the top of the arc, or maybe even do it just before so he's pushing off. So I'm going to try some timing change here. I'm going to put the clavicle, just make sure I select the clavicle. Forward momentum. He's going to sort of spring himself forward like a long jumper or something like that. And really try to get this character to do this sort of big kick-ass jump up to show his weight and show the world that no man has arrived as a very simple bouncing ball shape. Anyway, I accidentally pressed Z because I'm so smart. Okay. So, there we go. Looking good. Now, same sort of thing. I'm going to multi-select. Turn off my geometry. The elbow and the shoulder. Kind of bring this cat up here. Really have him sort of lunge forward. Revert back to my clavicle here. Give some more rotation. In X. And also, I'm going to kind of really get this sort of solid fist action happening as he jumps here like that, like it's hitting the extreme. I'm going to set tangent C to be flat, set tangent C to be flat, make sure everything is good. And what I'm going to do now in the graph editor, by multi-selecting everything, so what we have here is we've selected our arm, we've multi-selected everything, and again we were going to ask the question of what leads what. Currently what we have is all the keys hitting here at frame 1. extreme at frame 8 and extreme frame 19, one and the same. We have everything sort of hitting flat. Well, what if it was a case where we wanted to make it a little more dynamic so it doesn't know that the extreme is coming, and bang, we just sort of hit it like that. Go to View Infinity, check spacing of our curves and our extreme. And now what we can do is comparing it to what we have right now, which is basically just these two positions, kind of wacky, womp and back. Again, asking what leads what, go in, and now can sort of multi-select. I can just now go and select the shoulder and take everything, and just like the body, I can offset it. Maybe I'm going to offset the shoulder only by 1 frame. But again, go in, drop a key, voila, copy, paste. Blow this away, and we're good. We've got the spacing we want. And I'm going to keep going down through the arm chain the same sort of way. I'm going to grab the elbow. And now what I'm going to do is offset the elbow by 2 frames. 1, 2. And go here at 19. Drop a key. Copy that. Paste that. Frame 1, blow this away, and now finally the wrist or the hand. I will move this one by 3 frames, or if I really wanted to, really just screw around a little bit, I can do 4 frames. It's not really a big deal. Granted, only if it works, it's a big deal. If it doesn't work, it's not a good idea. So, frame 19, selecting all the curves. Bam. Copy. Paste. Blow this sucker away. Okay, now reset everything. Scrub through. It looks pretty cool. And now time to do Play Blast. Turn off the head because we haven't done that just yet. And check everything out. So basically, just to finish this thing off, all we have to really now add is the head. And it certainly appears that the head is moving because the actual body in itself, all through the spine chain, is moving. But there's technically no overlap on the head yet. Also, I took the liberty of just doing the other arm really quickly. And I just had an open spread hand. So what we have to do now is just quickly go through that. Let's crack a little key here on this head and neck. And basically where we're at now is we've basically tested a rig and gotten to know a rig and gotten to know all about simple shapes and difference of timing and spacing in Maya. And essentially, the little trick of multi-selecting, or attempting to multi-select. Oops, let's get this show on the road, Cammy. Head, neck, we're good. So, I'm going to put a key on the head at the top of the arc here. Maybe move him a little bit further back. Actually, I can reverse it. He's going to be coming inwards because we're thinking overlap now. My brain is getting fried. So that's the head and the neck a little bit forward. And also on the down position, what we're going to want to have is the head up in reverse. And very quickly, go to the graph editor and basically do the exact same thing that we've been doing this whole time. But we're going to try to hit the head hard here. And hide our spacing and our keys. And bow this by breaking the handles. So we can get a clear result in our spacing. And let's take a look at this curve and how we're doing here. So that, bam, that head is really going to hit down hard. And again, we think about the question of what leads what. So let's take the neck. And let's actually keep the neck there. And let's put the head one frame after the neck. I can blow any of this away if I wanted to. And again, we're going to drop a key. Frame 19, just to make sure we've got the appropriate spacing. Copy that, paste that here, if this would ever work. Clear out some keys that we don't want. Bow that, no problem. Blow that key away. And we should be laughing. And quickly do the fingers. Same sort of idea. But what I can do with the fingers here is I can quickly go to set my preferences if I wanted to. That's kind of ugly. What's going on there? I can go to keys, linear, flat, so I can basically just have them hit hard. And I'm going to multi-select. I'll do the thumb first to get some overlap. And I'm going to middle channel box, bring that thumb a little more open. And as he starts to come up on the landing, have it maybe closed, create some degree of drag. Blow that away. Copy that. Paste it there. And basically I'm going to go through, just like every other part of the body, and every single one of those fingers, I'm going to offset them. So I can get a nice feeling of overlap. And let's go check our shot cam. Turn off the curves and do a quick scrub. To see how this guy's going. And I think he's looking pretty great. So our final F-check we're about to do should show that two different objects with the exact same amount of timing have different weight. Plus we've offset positions on the character, we've learned about different parts of the character, and basically we've tested the rig and gotten to know the rig. So as we progress through this series, we can get into things like acting and cycles, like walk cycles, moving around. We're going to do some fight sequences. We're going to do a lot of different exciting stuff. I'm probably going to do lip sync, not with this character, but lip sync will be coming. But now we've basically got our head around interface of Maya and how things all come together. And now we're speaking the same language as far as curves, hiding our keys, setting different layouts, understanding how to break handles, and basically focus more on the animation and become accomplished character animators. That we just happen to be using Maya or whatever 3D package you're using. But F-curve is an F-curve. Timing and spacing, they're either good or they're not. It's appealing and entertaining or it's not. So let's stay the course and move forward and check our final play last, and that will be that. And here it is. all the shapes that we're looking for. Everything we needed. The final F check. Guy bouncing around. Just bouncing on the spot. And looking good.
We hope this DVD has helped you learn more about Maya, and we appreciate your support. Visit thenormanworkshop.com or visit norman3d.com. For training, visit Norman Online. DVDs by Dave